third session. Here we have Dr. Srimathi ma'am. Ma'am has completed her PhD in Ethiraj Women's College and now she is currently serving in the Department of English in Anna University. So with no further delay, I would like to welcome ma'am now.
A very good afternoon to everyone present here. I didn't complete my PhD at Ethiraj. I completed my PhD at Anna University. I'm stepping in here today for one Dr. Shobha, K.N. Shobha from my department, who moved to NITTR as associate professor. And I think Shobha's topic was on something that perhaps most of you all would have been very excited with. It was on AI tools in research writing. But I'm going to speak about a topic that perhaps, and I'm hopeful that some of you would be interested in. It's talking about the use of English in research writing. And whatever I say for the next 1 hour will be purely based on the, on the strength of me guiding around 18 research scholars. I completed my 30 years in this university on 15th of February of this year. So whatever I share with you will be based on that. I have one of my own research scholars, Dr. Kavita Singh, who comes from a place like Bihar. I remember when Kavita came in, her repertoire, so far as English was concerned, was pretty limited. But today when I listen to Kavita speak, sometimes I feel that she makes so much more sense in terms of she's able to exactly share what she wants to in English with words that perhaps I'm struggling to access at 57 years of age. Okay, so all those of you seated here and who are beginning on this, and I'd like to speak pretty plainly on this very difficult journey of doing research. Research is very difficult. When I did my research here in Anna University, I went through sheer trauma. I had a very difficult supervisor. And I don't know, sometimes I would very often go to the institute across to IIT Madras because I had a sympathizer there at that time, Professor Shirish Chowdhury in the Department of Humanities. And quite often keep talking about, what I was going through, because sometimes the experience was so traumatic, it went beyond my understanding, and it even affected me physically. And there were times when Shirish would tell me, Srimathi, he would say, drop your PhD into the nearby dustbin. So, but then, that I transformed. And today, those of you who looked into the Hindu would have seen one Dr. M.S. Nagarajan, retired professor of English from the University of Madras. And he was one of the teachers when I was a student at Madras University, and he was also one of the expert panel members when I attended the interview here. So the basis of my talk today begins with what Professor Emerson very often would say, and what he kind of also practiced as a teacher, that our thoughts must be extremely complex based on the area and the content that we wish to convey. But he says the words that we choose must be extremely simple. That is the basis of my talk today on how English should be used by a research scholar. I have tweaked the topic. When Professor Kumaresan, I remember Kumaresan, we were both young teachers, and it's a wonderful thing today to see him as the director of CFR. So when he told me yesterday, recent trends, I was thinking not recent trends. In language, there are no recent trends. But I would say in the assistance that we get in the use of English, perhaps there are something called recent trends, because I know all those of you seated here, depending upon how comfortable we are with, I see language purely as a tool. And I have seen my professor at Madras University, Professor Emerson, who would, he taught us postmodern criticism, and a chap called Derrida. Derrida was extremely difficult even for regular research scholars to crack even today. So Professor Emerson, I still remember him with that dhoti and that white shirt in Madras University MPhil classroom lecturing. He had actually sat in on Derrida's classes in France. So Emerson would convey that whole thing of postmodern criticism as how Derrida put it across, but his language was so simple that as students far removed from that culture and from that practice that Derrida was talking about, we could understand what was meant by deconstruction in the field of criticism. So, all of you beginning on this arduous journey, and I personally feel sometimes, why is it that willing suspension of disbelief descends on some of us at some points in our life, and we allow us ourselves to go through this very difficult task of doing a PhD? All those of you beginning that journey, let me tell you, one thing you all should keep close to yourselves the next 5 to 6 years of your life is to keep your language your own. Yes? And I'm not looking at it from the grammatical perspective, but I'm looking at it as a medium of expression. Yes? Whether I am doing my research in the field of physics, if there are some of you doing it in the field of humanities, most of you doing it in the field of engineering, and when I joined here initially, the first 10 years, when I was both at AC Tech, MIT, and at CEG. In AC Tech, many of the theses that was written in the Center for Crystal Growth, then biotechnology, chemical engineering, I've corrected the theses. So I kind of know what is happening in the field of engineering. In terms of the use of language. So what I can say is it has not changed much. One can't talk about recent trends in the use of English, but one can definitely talk about how technology has changed the use of English, and particularly in the field of research. If you are not a person who is majoring, who's specializing in either English literature or English language teaching, you can freely use tools like ChatGPT. Yes? Better so if you can get the paid version of Grammarly. Because most of the engineering theses that I have corrected in those days will have very small errors to do with, let's say, choice of tense. Yes? Choice of tense. There could be it could be an abuse of the definite article the, and subject and verb agreement. These are the three principal areas where we as Indian users of English have a problem with. Now, with spell check and all that, in those days, I remember in the 90s, late 90s, when people were submitting theses from here, if your spelling was not the British spelling, then what people would do is they would say, I know one particular engineering student's thesis was returned by the foreign examiner because the examiner said, you have used American spelling, please use only British spelling. There was a time when examiners were quite finicky about the kind of spelling, but today people are more democratic. So with the coming of AI, I would say to a large extent, language use has become more democratic. Yes? And don't feel shy, don't feel ashamed, don't feel bad about using these tools. But if you can get the paid version of ChatGPT, the paid version of Grammarly, I think that's very essential as research scholars. We get the paid version. So whatever we are writing makes sense. But you cannot rely entirely on technology to do the writing for you. There must be something called a draft. Yes? Now, how do I actually, the last 2.5 days, people might have told you about the chapters and then what is scope. I'm only going to focus on the abstract, the summary, and then generally on the chapters in terms of use of English. Today, people with AI, they are saying, let's keep our language clear, let's keep it direct, straightforward, and free from overuse of jargon, right? So, whichever subjects that we are specializing in, I think it's extremely important. Language should never be used as a tool to show off, even for someone who's done their PhD in English. Because I think somewhere in India we have gone thoroughly wrong by putting our focus on language and, kind of at the cost of thought, idea, and content. As research scholars and somebody who's working towards a PhD, I think it's extremely critical that you must make your language subservient to your thought. Whether it be a seminar presentation you are making, whether you are doing your course papers, yes, when you ultimately sit down to write your chapters, let it be that you are giving your thought, your idea, precedence over language. Right? That is very, very important. Because when you are giving precedence to the content, then you are going to use language that is free from unnecessary jargon, which is simple, clear, direct, straightforward, gender neutral, bias free. Okay? It is not going to be pessimistic. There was a time when in theses, you had people using that word subjects. Today, people are saying don't use subjects, use the word participants. I mean, there is a world of difference if somebody uses the word Negro today as against someone using that word black, because black is more progressive. Yes? So the emphasis is on that, not so much on language that is, unless if it is your style. See, one thing, basic thing to understand, I too am in the process of my 19th scholar submitting her thesis. It is a lot of difficult time for the supervisor too, because when you're correcting, you're not correcting so much the language as you're correcting the thought. Yes, that the scholar has enough content, but perhaps the scholar is kind of stressed out and is not able to do it. That's when a supervisor steps in, right? But then it's so convenient for us as supervisors to go around saying, I'm in the process of writing my student's thesis. No student gives a supervisor that kind of a freedom to go around writing his or her thesis. But then because they have strained themselves so much and they've stretched themselves so far, they find it difficult. That's when, the thought process becomes a little too complicated, and therefore the language also becomes complicated. How do I work towards something to make it simple? Yes, I learned it the very difficult way, but I can share with you some of the ways in which you can make your use of language easy. Yes, I mean, if you have the smartphone with you, things become that much more simpler. If you're putting down, let's say, of course, in the sciences and in the engineering theses, you will not have what's called the hypothesis. But it's always good to know what the hypothesis is and to have it with you, because that's what you will eventually test, and you will prove it right or wrong. You will say this is null hypothesis, or the hypothesis has been proved right. Now, when you're putting that down, what are the two variables? What is it that you are checking as part of your thesis? Such things you can quickly type on your chat GPT, because that will tell you the extent to which, whether you have that clarity. Yes, the clarity, because when you're beginning, you need to have that hypothesis. Then you need to have your scope very clear. You need to have your research problem written down. And then lastly, you need to have what's called the research design. For all of this, unless we are crystal clear up here, then it's very difficult for us to be able to tell people who are listening to us, to be able to share with them whatever it is that we wish to convey. And that's where language comes into play. There are only two major language skills that are assessed when someone's doing their thesis. One is reading and the other is writing. So the more I read, the better I become in my writing. Yes. And if I have to say I must become better, I must also become simpler, because if I can get beneath the skin of my research thesis problem, then it means that whatever I am stating, I will be very clear in stating. Yes. So from day one, I would advise you all to write more, because initially when we begin, and when things are still very hazy up here, so far as our research is concerned, our problems are concerned, at least thankfully in Anna University they give you those 6 months to kind of warm up to that idea that you are actually becoming a research scholar. And you can lap up so many things when you're doing your coursework. I would encourage you all to keep writing. The more you write, the better you will become at it. The better you become at writing, the more simpler you will be. And the more simpler you are, the more clearer you will be in whatever ideas you are sharing with your supervisor. And the more clearer you are, you will also understand that your thesis carries that much more weight. You understand? So today, with the coming of AI, the emphasis so far as English is concerned in research writing is to be very simple. I mean, all our senior teachers, our good teachers said it in the past, but then somewhere we have got into our heads that, if I am to be respected as a scholar, because if you're making that huge leap from being a student to a scholar, then people think that they must be able to say things in a very convoluted way. You see, the more complex I am, people think that I am that much more intelligent. It's the reverse, which is the true so far as language is concerned. So, recent trends in English is nothing very special. It only means, one, that I am first and foremost, if you all are interested, you all can take it down, I am grammatically correct. Work towards that, because we see a lot of research theses where the grammar mistakes will hinder the meaning coming through. Yes? Most theses, perhaps from India, people are, finding it a huge problem because they cannot understand what it is that we are trying to say, because we are giving language the go by. Right? We're giving language the go by. So, first and foremost, I think grammatical accuracy is very important. What do I mean by grammatical accuracy? These are things people have told us in the past, and no matter how much technology can come in, this is what will be emphasized so far as language is concerned. There are only 3 areas where Indians have a problem so far as English is concerned. What I said some time ago: subject and verb agreement, use of tense, use of the definite article the. Either there is an overuse of the definite article or there's an underuse. We do not relate tense to time. Yes? Tense is only a grammatical notion of real time as how we use it in our day-to-day lives. So when that connection we cannot see, we are using the past perfect, we are using the present perfect, we are using the simple present when we must be using the simple past. I remember when I submitted my PhD thesis here in 2000, people at that time insisted that the abstract must be written in the present tense. Okay, they said the abstract must be, you must use is. That seemed very odd, because you had finished your study, you had finished your thesis, and then you were writing the abstract last, the summary which the examiner is bound to read before he or she is interested in reading some of your chapters. And then we always wondered, why is? Everyone said it's a commonsensical thing. I mean, you finished with your study, you're only reporting what you have said. We must essentially be using only the simple past. And then they changed it. Yes. So what I'm trying to say is, whenever we are looking at grammar, you look at grammar as a tool to create meaning in your thesis. Don't look at grammar in terms of rules that need to be followed. Because sometimes we could be making a huge mistake with tense, when we are looking at grammar as a set of rules that need to be learnt by heart. But if you look at grammar as a tool to create meaning, and that's very important for a research scholar, because when I'm presenting papers, when I'm sharing my ideas in technical symposiums, when I'm ultimately writing my research theses, I have to necessarily look at grammar as a means of creating meaning. Then I should not be worried so much about rules. Why is it that in that fourth chapter where I'm reporting my study, I am shifting between the past tense and the present tense? I mean, why am I shifting? Because I'm talking about something that I actually did versus I'm talking about a theory which will continue to have relevance. So I'm using the simple present tense. You get the point? So, therefore, it is important that you start relating to. Now, where can I go to look for good grammar books that can assist me as a research scholar? Y'all can refer to this. There's a person called Michael Swan. Michael Swan, who's written a very nice, simple grammar book, keeping people like you and me, who are second language users of English. One you have, it's called Basic English Usage by a person called Michael Swan. He will describe grammar to you in a way that makes sense to you. Okay? Michael Swan's Basic English Usage. If any of you here is in CEG campus, you all can always come to the Department of English Library and you all can borrow copies and keep them with you. You can photocopy them and you can return it to them if you are here in the campus. And then if you're very comfortable looking at websites, you have a website called onestopenglish.com. Onestopenglish.com will also give you help with grammar. And of course, I think it's very important you all sign up for the paid version of Grammarly. Because the moment you put your sentence in there, it will tell you exactly what is the problem with that sentence. Yes? And you can always seek the assistance. So far as grammar is concerned, this is something that you can do. Of course, as research scholars, we think, oh, my work must look scholarly. How then can I improve my use of vocabulary? Yes? I have been insisting and emphasizing, saying that we must keep it simple. So simple that people think, my goodness, I mean, as I'm reading, I can make sense of what. I mean, imagine someone like me, I'm not in any way connected with science or technology or engineering, but I have corrected a good number of engineering theses in this university. Yes? And how is it that I was able to understand? So, you are free to use words related to your area of specialization. But I would say filter those words which are language related. You can take it down. That's what is meant by jargon free. Jargon free is not using words that are related to your areas of specialization, but words which are, you use a lot of adjectives, you use a lot of adverbs, just for the sake of saying that, because I'm a research scholar, my language must have a certain. No. I think a good thesis, any good thesis, presentation, progress review, meetings that you all will have, doctoral meetings that you all will attend, when communication happens as and when it happens, instantaneously as it were, then I think it is successful if it is face to face. Just as when someone is reading your thesis and someone is turning the pages and saying, my goodness, what wonderful ideas that have been put forward, then I would say that person has been very successful with his or her writing. So, choice of, you can say, general vocabulary, keep it down, use your technical words. And only one thing we must focus, but y'all are not in the danger of doing this in engineering. Generally, engineering theses are free from bias. They are not prejudiced. I can give you one example from my thesis. I had my professor from Madras University, my guru, Professor Saraswati, correct my thesis. And in the second chapter, the literature review, and I had not made this up myself, but that particular year, 1999, the Hindu published, in those days, the Hindu would have a separate supplement called the Open Page, not the Education Plus. And in that, there was an article where they were discussing higher education in India. And the the person who wrote that particular article had used this sentence. They said, in everything in the last so many years after independence, India has made huge strides in so many fields, but so far as education is concerned, it's a graveyard. I thought, oh, this was a very telling kind of an expression, and so I put it down in my thesis. I'm only giving you an example to say, and then Saras circled it off and she said, one doesn't have to be so pessimistic and so negative when writing a thesis. So only this, please put it down. So far as the choice of general words are concerned, when I say you, as a research scholar, I mean, what you all will go through in the next 5 to 6 years, and I pray that each one of you, your journeys will be journeys which are memorable, but in a very good way. One thing you must remember is this is a transformational experience in your life. Yes? So, what we should work towards will be getting to be better people. So, your choice of words should not reflect negativity, very important, to be very objective, to not use language, vocabulary that is connotative. What do I mean by connotative? Words that will carry a lot of feeling, but words that are denotative, meaning to say the general, direct, straightforward meanings of words. So when you are choosing words to be able to say, even when you're making a commentary about the state of affairs in this country, as researchers, it's extremely important that we remain objective. Yes? So when I say vocabulary should be jargon free, that word jargon does not apply to words that you take from your area. Yes? I am only talking about words which are general, that you will be using along with your technical vocabulary. There alone, you should be extremely cautious and careful about your choice of words. Because the person whom we write, one thing you all must remember, and this I learned from my supervisor, not the supervisor I had here, but from Saras, is that one thing you must understand, we write and we write only for that examiner. So she would always say, she would use a Latin term. She would say, when you are writing your project report, when you're talking about use of language, she would say, keep this Latin term in mind, ad nauseum. Ad nauseum. Ad nauseum means I don't omit any detail. For you, the examiner, to read, appreciate, and evaluate my research study, I will give you everything. But the mental perception I have of the examiner should be that of a 10-year-old child. So your choice of vocabulary should be the vocabulary that a 10-year-old child should be in a position to process. Yes, that is extremely important. I began by talking about Professor M.S. Nagarajan because it's very rare to see a scholar of that rank, okay, a man who studied at Oxford, who was, one of his closest friends was William Golding, and William Golding was a Nobel Prize winner. Yes? So, and for Professor Emerson to be able to teach, students coming from various colleges in Tamil Nadu, and to be able to teach a very complex concept in criticism, but to put it across so simply that each of those 15 students in that MPhil class in the University of Madras understood and were also in a position to appreciate what was being said. So when you're saying I'm working towards writing my thesis, keep this thought in mind that my examiner is a 10-year-old child. So my language should be that simple. But your examiner definitely will be a specialist in your area of specialization. So, jargon, use your technical vocabulary as generously as possible. The next thing that you have to keep in mind so far as language is concerned is organization. I think much would have already been said about it. So, when I say language, we have to look at language not just in terms of the sentences that we generate, not just in terms of the vocabulary that we use, but in terms of, see, your research report is a reflection of the state of your mind. Y'all can Google up this person and see, one Professor Jacob Taru. Taru would always say that, Shri, if you have internalized your research problem, yes, if you have internalized your research problem, you are just beginning your journey, so you have to be patient with yourselves. But if you live with that research problem for the next 5 to 6 years, you get beneath the skin of that topic. When you get beneath the skin of the topic, he says you will need only 3 minutes to be able to explain to another person who's not even associated with your field very clearly what it is that you have done as part of your research. Yes? So, what is the uppermost thing there? The uppermost thing is organization. When someone says, at random, if somebody says, now, okay, so what have you chosen for your research? Yes? Today, people will be patient with you if you kind of flounder, and then, you say so many things before coming to what your research problem is. But 6 years down the line, people will expect you to be clear and coherent. Yes? So, after grammar, what you should work towards, so far as the use of English in research, is coherence. Coherence is a state of our mind. Yes? If I'm very clear up here, then I am very casual about the organization of ideas. Right? If research is all connected, you begin with the choice of your research topic, then you go to your aim, then you go to your objectives, then you worry about the scope, then you put down your research design, you problematize your research topic. Yes? One thing after another is so beautifully connected in research, I sometimes wonder why we Indians go and confuse it. Yes? So, coherence is something that you all will have to work towards. Every time you write, I would encourage each and every one of you not to put off that writing process till you finish your research. Every day, write a page. If you write a page every day, initially it's going to be torturous, but then you will find that by the time you come to the end of the submission of your research report, you're not going to find it such a huge task to be able to write your research. The more you see, as this is the only chance that as regular, ordinary human beings, each one of us gets the opportunity to be able to write something close to a book. Yes, the project report, that research report, the thesis. So, how do I get good at it? I have to look at it as an act of communication. And communication, I get better only if I practice. So every day from today, I would encourage you all to write a page. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that linear fashion of chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Earlier, speakers might have told you that you start your research with the second chapter, the literature review, and then you move on to your methods and materials, your results and discussion, finish your conclusion, then come to your introduction. Because by then, you have that clarity, you have that understanding, and you own that research topic. So, the first chapter is like writing that chapter in the novel. You're setting the stage for your examiner to be able to read and appreciate the rest of your research report. So, practice writing. Coherence is extremely difficult to achieve all on a sudden. So, unless you start now putting things down and then going through what you have written, for you to be able to see that can you understand whatever it is that you have read. I will give you the title of this one book. Only today, one of my research scholars, she's 61 years old, She's working on a very interesting area called the plain English movement. She has worked in the insurance sector. She has been with Business Line, Economic Times, and all. And she is beginning her PhD after the completion of her career. So today, in the course of her presentation, she gave the name of a book, which I think all of us as research scholars must hold. That must be our Bible. The Art of Readable Writing. You can take it down and you can go to Amazon and see, published in the year 1949. Yes, maybe long before your grandfathers were born. So, but buy that book if you can buy it. Yes, it's called The Art of Readable Writing. Now, when I keep saying that grammatical accuracy is very important, and I'm saying vocabulary is very important, but please play it down. Coherence is very important. Clarity is very important. But the most important in a research thesis is content. What do we understand by readability? Okay, the person, his name is one Rudolph, and you can just take down his surname, Fleisch. Fleisch. This man has given a readability index. Most of your research supervisors will tell you, I mean, can't you make it more readable? So, what is meant by readability of writing? That nobody teaches us in our schools, nobody teaches us in our colleges. English language teachers don't tell us what it is. So even when we are writing our PhDs, we are still trying to figure out what is meant by readability. Yes? And so our emphasis is all on the wrong points. So what is readability? Now I said in face-to-face communication, you say this communication, this particular conversation that I had with somebody, this particular person is extremely effective in communication. One is not looking at, simple peripheral things like pronunciation, but somebody is looking at the ease with which, somebody was saying something and I understood. The same rule should apply to writing. And writing is difficult. See, the nice thing about face-to-face communication, it's very spontaneous. Yes? Whereas writing is a very deliberate process. That's why research writing is difficult. Not just for us as second language users of the language. Anywhere in the world, research writing is difficult because research, all said and done, is a very solo journey. I do it, I break my head, I worry about it, okay? I am tormented at times. I'm discouraged, I'm demotivated, I'm sad most of the times because I don't know with whom I should go and share whatever it is that I have. But there are moments of joy, there are moments of happiness, there are moments when there is that sense of satisfaction, of achievement. So there are a whole gamut of emotions that the human person goes through, yes? And sometimes with a supportive supervisor, but sometimes with a supervisor who just wishes to see you dead. But all those times I survive and I submit my PhD report, how will my examiner actually appreciate what I've written sitting in a university in the US or in Canada or in Australia? How will that person appreciate what I have carried out in an as yet developing country like India? This is a question we have to ask ourselves. So how can my writing become readable? What is readability? Readability is looking at the piece of writing that we do, not from our point of view as writers, but from the point of view of the reader. Yes? And who is the reader in our cases? It is the examiner. He is the most important reader. So, if my writing can be understood by a man or a woman who's far removed from my culture, from my research context, then my writing must have in it everything that my reader can understand. That is readability. So, when you all write from today, don't say that this piece of writing is so easy for me to understand, because as students, it's easy for us as writers. Since we have written it, it's easy for us to understand. But you always now start looking at it very critically to say, Can another person read and understand what I have written? So, to that extent, is my writing clear? Is my writing coherent? Does my writing have the right kind of vocabulary? Is my writing biased? Is it prejudiced? Yes, what about my paragraphing? Are my sentences unnecessarily long? Are my sentences a paragraph long? Yes, start looking at your writing as a reader, then you will achieve what is called that readability in writing. Yes, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens if you train yourself, you will see 8 months from now, you are that much more effective as a writer. You see, in research, we use our ability to communicate orally only in the viva. Until then, we have to put all our efforts and energies into only writing. Writing good reports, writing good progress reports, writing our course papers well, writing our comprehension examinations well. So there is a lot of emphasis on writing, and some of us may not have written so much. And suddenly, when you become a research scholar and someone says, now write, you see, write, read. I remember Professor Emerson telling us the first day we sat in that MPhil class, he said, you are making that huge leap from being a student to a scholar. To qualify to be a scholar, he said, from today, the 15 of you will have to read 100 pages per day. Whether you are reading non-fictional books or you are reading fiction, you should see to it you read 100 pages, because the more you read, the more comfortable you will become with your writing. So that is how it goes. But start that writing. And another thing, I am pretty old-fashioned, and at 57, I grew up in a world that only had the pen and the paper. So if you're beginning, don't start by typing things on the computer. Okay, people now, I mean, even if those of us watching Instagram and you're watching some pages, people are saying that the brain is connected to the, the fingers holding the pen in hand. Hold that pen and write. Because the more you write that way, you will develop what's called that felicity in writing. Okay, Felicity. Felicity is that kind of ease with which I can communicate when I am writing. Yes, so start with just writing a single side of a page, start even with a paragraph, and then keep writing. Don't worry too much about, is my writing impressive? As research scholars, remember, particularly those of you doing your doctoral degrees in areas other than humanities and the social sciences, I would say don't put that premium on the language. Put the premium and put your emphasis on your ideas. So language has to necessarily take a back seat. Yes, language has to necessarily take a back seat. That's why I'm saying play it down. Play it down, keep it as simple as possible. When you keep it as simple as possible, you are also giving that much more emphasis to your ideas, to the content that you wish to share. Sometimes some of the new ideas that you wish to share, some of those wonderful things that we are sometimes able to put across in the first chapters of our thesis, all of that will come to you naturally if you start practicing your writing. Yes? The last thing that I will focus, maybe I'll give you all some time to ask if you have put down some questions. Okay, I can share with you some of the, maybe the websites that we tell our students to use, those who do their PhDs in English. British Council has a free website. Okay, it's called www.learnenglish.com. Learnenglish.com. There is a britishcouncil.org website also that you can use. That's also very helpful. There is one book which you all can all download even now. It's called Academic Writing for International Students, published by Routledge. Maybe I will share the PDF version with Professor Kumaresan or with Dr. Soundaranayake, and they can share it with you. Academic Writing by Routledge. Now, the whole entire book, the PDF version, is available free online, which means you all can download it. They give you a lot of inputs on writing. They call it project reports. You only see there is no difference between a project report that is written by a BE student and somebody who's doing PhD. I only see in terms of the volume. The number of papers is more because the number of research that is done is more. Right? But otherwise, things don't change in terms of chapterization and things like that. So you can use that book. Another nice university website that I think all of us should use as second language users of English would be www.purdueowl.com. Purdue Online Writing Lab. PURDUEOWL. OWL stands for Online Writing Lab. Okay. Now they give you the APA style sheet, the latest APA style sheet. They also give us basic grammar exercises. They give a lot of input on research writing. All of it done from the point of view of second language users like you and I. Yes, so this is a website, university website that you can use. Limited university websites and other websites that you can use. There's another book called Technical Communication. I do not know if they have the soft copy version of that book, but that's a very nice book which gives lots of inputs on research writing. But if you come to if you are here in CEG, AC Tech or MIT, I would invite you to come to the English department and we have those books on display. You all can look at those books. You can also take a photocopy of the book or the pages that you wish to photocopy and go. But this academic writing for international students is a very nice book. It also gives you a lot of writing exercises that we can do. And it also takes us in stages. So that ultimately when we write that research report, what is the kind of support that we need to have? Yes. So don't worry too much about English. I mean, if you say I studied, I'm from a mother tongue medium. All my English teachers at Madras University, professors who studied in Edinburgh and in universities, top universities, began in Tamil medium schools. Yes, so we shouldn't, as research scholars, worry so much about the fact that, I may not be so equipped in English, because all your subject books, as people who are already specializing at the doctoral level, you will have that necessary basic command over the language. Our only problem is how do I now put it down on paper so another person can read and understand. In order to overcome that, the only little hard work that you need to put in is to start writing. The more you write, the better you become. Preserve those papers that you're writing, because some of your finest ideas, you will put it down now, because when your mind is free, you will catch all those nuggets. So put those ideas now. Don't worry so much about language per se. And you should not worry so much about language at the PhD level, because we are not out here to run a race. Okay, we are not out here to be able to impress somebody with our language. We are only here because we allowed ourselves to go through this torture of doing a PhD. Yes, this is willingly we have taken it up. So when we've willingly taken it up, let's only make that little effort in saying, okay, now in terms of my ideas, sharing them. And another thing you all must also understand, today people are talking about multilingual PhDs. And with all your translation tools and all that, it is not something that is too difficult. Yes? So don't worry about language. Language and particularly English communication should never be a stumbling block. Catch those wonderful ideas that you get in your own chosen areas. See how you can put them across in the simplest of simple ways in English. That must be your focus as a research scholar. I'd like to stop here because anyway, I was just stepping in for my former colleague, Dr. Shobha. Shobha would have done a wonderful job, but she lost her father-in-law day before yesterday. So I stepped in because I have a lot of love for a younger colleague of mine who was a huge help to me when I was there as head of the department. So anyway, I hope you all found it useful. Anything that y'all have, the books that I said, y'all are free to come to the Department of English there. We have a wonderful set of grammar books. You can photocopy them and return it to us if you are here. Otherwise, we are a little wary because, it's a small department which doesn't attract too much of funds from the university. Thank you all so much for your patient listening. And if you have questions, then I'd be willing to take them.
Now I request DD sir to felicitate ma'am with a book of remembrance.